I want to, it looks like we probably have a pretty good start, although I'm sure we'll get some stragglers here as we go. But what I'd like to do is welcome Kevin Clarridge, who's a CCAD alumni, class of 2013. He's gracious enough to share with us. I'm super intrigued, just given the little bit that I've seen of the backdrop of his new digs. Curious very much to hear what he has to say about design. But before I sort of hand the baton over to him, I want to kind of give you a little bit of background about Kevin, although there might be some things that I'll leave off. But several of the places that he's worked at here locally in town that many of you probably have at least heard of, is he's done internships with Design Central. As a contractor, he's also worked with Zukin, that Jeff Accursi is a part of. He also worked for a length of time for a little over 2 years at Design Central. From there, and it sounds like from conversations with Oscar Garcia and maybe others, there's a mass exodus to try to go to the great Northwest, and in that effort, that landed him for a short spell for another 2 years at Pinzar in the Seattle, Washington area, and then more recently at Teague, again in the Seattle area. I think, one of the things for you guys to be aware of is Teague is like a classic, at least my vision of them, and Kevin can clarify. To me, it's like working with one of the most well-known design firms in the history of design firms. I mean, they're just an agency that's been around for a long time, has a lot of classic roots in the beginning of industrial design, and I'm sure continues to do that. So I'm be intrigued to learn a little bit more about some of the stuff that he does at Teague. But in the meantime, I'll turn the floor over. It sounds like he's got a pretty good lengthy presentation to share with you guys. So I want to make sure he's got as much time as he needs, and you guys will have time for questions. So with that, I will pass the baton, and Kevin, it's all yours.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Let me share my screen here. Play. All right. Just dive straight into it. In case you missed my face, there it is again. I'm a senior industrial designer at Teague currently. Grew up around Columbus, Ohio, in a really small town in the middle of nowhere. Grew up very poor with nothing. I was the first in my family to go to college, and I had no idea what industrial design was going to college. I was going for like concept art and illustration. So I ended up at Columbus College of Art and Design for, a lot of love for sketching and conceptual design, entertainment design, kind of that realm, and then discovered industrial design my freshman year. As a kid, I'd always loved, tearing apart computers down to their last part. And I love problem solving and, not so much math and like solving equations, but I always loved the problem solving. So when I found this perfect blend of art and design, I fell in love. And so here's just a few snippets of my college career. You can see I was into, you might start feeling the vibe of what I love, spaceships, cars, supercars, technology, anything related to tech. That was kind of what I was into back in the day. And hopefully a lot of you can achieve better work than I was doing back then. So just a quick timeline of like where I've been. Back when I was in school, I interned at a place called Travelon. They're in Chicago. They do a lot of soft goods. They had a really interesting blend. So there was only 3 designers, including myself, and they did consultancy. So a lot of companies would come to them and say like, we have this machine fishing reel that's $500. Can you create a case for it? So we did a lot of soft goods consultancy, as well as they had their own products. So I was able to like design my own bags while I was there. Like a line of bags for their brand. So it was kind of an interesting in-house and consultancy experience. Again, with very few designers, so I had a lot of responsibility. While I was in school, I also interned at Design Central. Hopefully you guys are familiar with them. Great people over there. Learned a lot as an intern. My first day actually interning there, jumped in a car and we went out to go do ethnographic research in a home, studying people's habits and behaviors. So an amazing place for design process front to back. I didn't really recognize how much of the the power that they had and how much amazing industrial design process from front to back they were really doing until I kind of left the area. Headed over to Zukenplan, they were doing some automotive work. So I wanted to kind of get involved with that. And I had some friends that were working over there as well. And also like Jeff Accursi and Aaron Searles and so many people over there, great people. Got to do some work with them. And then went back to Design Central and became a senior designer there. So I was leading teams, working with more junior designers, really like leading projects. And that's kind of where I was kind of getting my design chops, was back at Design Central again. And after working there for a long time, really was looking for more of the consumer electronics focus, kind of looking for more tech. And the Pacific Northwest is amazing for the huge tech giants that are out here. So working at a place like Pensar, which you guys might not have even heard of, we were doing a lot of really cool work. Some of my favorite projects I worked at Pensar, working with some of the tech giants in the area. So you have Microsoft, Amazon, Google, there's places like Valve that do VR. I got to like lead 3 different projects on Valve VR, including like their next generation headset, just one of my favorite projects of all time. So just being in this area and being close to these companies in the Pacific Northwest, if you're willing to move and go to these different hotbeds, obviously like Silicon Valley is an area of interest for tech, but the Pacific Northwest actually has a lot of these big players. And if you're a consultant, you can actually do a lot of work with them. So I had a lot of fun at Pensar. And then now I'm a senior designer at Teague. And so Teague is a little different. They do consumer electronics. We still work with all those big tech companies. We do a lot of like physical and digital products that are, integrated experiences. But they also have this major legacy of automotive and transportation and mobility, which kind of resonates with what I love in cars and the future of vehicles. So Teague today, their mission, or their statement rather, is we design and build the future. And so we try to do that with every project. And I'll just give you guys a little clip, a little reel. So Teague is actually made up of like 2 different studios. We have a team of like 30 designers that are in Seattle downtown, which I'm a part of. And then we have a studio up north, a little bit north of Seattle, that's Teague ADS, which is the aviation studio. And they have like 250 employees that fluctuates, and they do, massive airplane interiors. I'm on that small little team that's more like a bunch of hackers, where we just do like a lot of the physical product design with digital interfaces. But having the capabilities of the team up north, we can make giant prototypes. They have amazing VR capabilities. They design their own VR, software to be able to experience things in VR and kind of go straight from CAD modeling like in Rhino and export it to a client, send them a file, and let them put on a VR headset. So like a lot of the integration of like our capabilities with what we do in aviation is really fun to work with as our small team, doing like weird projects like you're seeing on screen, where we're able to like test and stand up different interfaces. And it's really all about user experience. So, if you have a conference room device and you're like, hey, what if you had software stitching in people on 360 video? We have the right people within that 30 to say like, what is the physical and digital experience? And then we have technical designers that are able to stand it up and make a real functioning prototype. So again, I like to think of us as a bunch of hackers, and most of them are way more talented in their fields of software than I am. And I'm kind of just a more physical asset to that team. But Teague's mission is to build a new and better world. So that really resonates with myself. In every project, we kind of try to tackle that, trying to just improve user experience. So I just wanted to kind of put this deck together. This is really just as inspiration, and obviously like a lot of you are sitting in the same studios that I sat in, but where you start does not affect your potential. So if you go to UC, you might get a little bit of a head start just based on how many internships they get. But I'd really like to stress that like where you start does not affect your potential. A lot of those people that like end up going to art center that I've experienced, they stop learning. They think that they're so talented when they get out of school. They just never have the curiosity to keep learning and growing. So just a note there. Great words of advice that I heard from a creative director that I had once was, your career is a marathon, not a sprint. So when you get out of school, you kind of have this feeling like you need to land that dream job. Like as soon as you get out, I need to go work. I need to go work for Astro. That's where the best designers are. But really, your career is a marathon. So like all of your learning and whatever journey you're on will keep helping you grow and learn. So just consider it a marathon. And then another really fun note within my career is that stars may align and they might not. So just define like your path, your end goal, and kind of work towards it. So this is an interesting story where like, this is actually a design by Priority Designs in Columbus. And I really love their work, and I always wanted to have a chance to see what they were doing inside their studio. But when I graduated, they actually weren't hiring junior designers for like a period of like, I think it was like 4 or 5 years. And by the time they actually ended up hiring a junior designer, I was already too senior for that. So like sometimes the stars just don't align. So just don't like pick out, you know, Astro Studios or whoever your dream company is. And just say like, you know, that just the opportunities might not ever happen for you. So just more define like your goal and work towards it. So this whole presentation is kind of my theory on how do you land your dream job, and that matches everything you love within design. So everything I'm going to share in here is all personal projects. Everything that I'll share is outside of work. I've done a lot of really cool work that I've been paid for, but everything in here is not paid for. This was all just out of my passion and love for what I wanted to do. So like early in my career, I was doing a lot of like Swiffer and Febreze work, you know, designing for Fisher Price. And obviously that has a much different feel than what you're seeing on screen here. This is what I really love and what I wanted to get into. And I think that like by trying to do what I loved most, it drawed in the opportunity of working at a place like Teague towards me, even though my portfolio didn't really match that. So my theory is that you become gravity. And so what do I mean by that? What does that mean? How do you do that? I think design, like oversimplified, comes down to 3 different elements. Discover, create, and communicate. And then obviously in a cycle. So on any design program, you go through these 3 things, hopefully in multiple iterations. So we'll kind of break down what each of these mean and kind of go through how you can kind of improve those 3 topics. So discover, to make known or visible, or to obtain sight or knowledge for the first time. If you're interested in consultancy, which is my perspective, the only thing that I've ever done is worked consultancy. I have not worked in-house. So again, just take this as this is my lens. But as a consultant, a lot of times you need to tell your clients who they might have been working in this industry their whole career. And you need to come to them and within, you know, a period of a few weeks, tell them something they've never heard of, or show them, you know, a different perspective or point of view that they've never thought of, having worked there their whole career. So discover is an interesting topic. This is actually a shout out to Oscar Garcia in here working with me on a controller project. So this is how I like to think, like get everything out on a board, and you can also do this digitally. There's a lot of really cool tools like Miro where you can do this online now. But ask all the questions. Don't be afraid to ask about what you don't know. So like, this is just my way of like getting all of my thinking out onto a board so where I can kind of dissect it. There's nothing worse than like if you're in a meeting and, you know, your client says something like, oh, this needs to have adjustable IPD. And you're like, yeah, sure. And you just keep working. And then like, you know, weeks later, you show up with a concept and you look like a total idiot because you just didn't ask that question. You didn't want to look stupid in that moment. But you just always ask all the questions so that you can prepare yourself for the future. Get inspired and be aware of the market. So this is extremely important. It's something I didn't do as a student. You kind of have an idea for something that you think is interesting and you just kind of attack it without like understanding like what other products are doing in the category, or defining like what your success criteria for a really good project is. So I have like a running database of inspiration. I put it on my walls, you know, have it on my hard drives, have it on the internet now. You can just have it stored online. But basically just to be aware of like what a great product is. So if you're designing a Bluetooth speaker, you should be looking up, you know, to define the success criteria of like, this is a great speaker and this is what they're doing. In the professional sense, you don't want to show up and show them an idea that's worse than products that are already on the market. So if you show them this really cool feature and they're like, yeah, you know, Microsoft did that 3 years ago. So just being aware of the market is really important, and it'll elevate your skills as a student tremendously. Never stop learning, become a dementor. So this is just a personal philosophy of anything and anyone that's around me. I want to absorb that knowledge forever. So like if we're working together, I want to like see the way you work. I want to see the way you sketch, the way you CAD model. I'm gonna absorb it. So just like listen more, you know, just absorbing everything that's around you. Be a sponge. Lose the ego and separate yourself from your work. So you really need to have like 2 sides of yourself. You need to have the side of yourself that's designing, and the side of yourself that you can split away from that and just you know, objectively look at what you did and pick its flaws and say, you know, this really sucks. You know, like this hurts in my hand. So just don't fall in love with what you're designing and be able to like separate yourself from that. You really need to be able to, you know, self-criticize. And obviously you can get that from other coworkers, but if you can do it internally, it helps a lot. Find mentors. They can also be non-ideers. So a lot of time when people think of, having mentors or trying to, find mentors for your career, they think of like, who is me in the future? Like I need to find myself in the future. And it's really just can be anyone. Like you can find anyone that's, navigated through as a design researcher or just any other career, just to help you identify like how to navigate your own problems and kind of help someone to like bounce your ideas off of and talk through your problems and your current situation. Mentors are really important for that, and they can really like shed light on things that are obvious to them that are not obvious to you kind of in that moment, and with limited experience for sure. Listen more. Even if the comment is not totally true, there's probably a nugget of truth, so dissect it and apply it. This is like a controller project that I was working on, and someone had made a comment, and instead of just, sometimes people will make like what you might easily pass off as like, oh, that's a stupid comment, or like that doesn't make sense, or they don't understand or whatever. Like actually like dig into it and find out like what they mean, because it'll only elevate your own work. So there's a thread here where I'm trying to chat with this person and figure out what they're saying. But just in general, like whenever you share your work and someone says something that might not make sense, like really dig into it, because it'll just keep elevating your work. Don't be afraid to dig into your own criticism. So, oh, turn that down. Design yourself, become ruthlessly introspective. So I'm still in this process of trying to like define my own self, and just like really define what I love and only share the kind of things that I love. So I think it's just important to like, like as we go through our career, you kind of need to define like who you are and what you want to be, and not just be a cookie cutter designer. So really like taking yourself almost as a design project, like what's working, what's not, how can I iterate on this design and improve it. And maybe again, do what you love, not what will get you the most Instagram likes. So this is a really important topic of our generation, is like social media and how much it impacts like what people's perception of you is. So just make sure you're just doing what you love. You'll draw people that are actually care about your work, instead of just trying to show what you think will get the most likes and get you insta famous. Should be obvious, but a great way to use social media, which I personally love, is using it for accountability and feedback. So like if you start like certain projects, or if you start doing Inktober and you commit to like sketching every day for 30 days, or you start this process of like showing a project, it really forces you to follow through with it. So using it more for accountability and really trying to force yourself to like get into a mode of like improving your own skills. And obviously like when you share it with the world, you're immediately trying to do better and keep everything growing. And I think just using it for accountability is a much better way than just inflating your ego. So the second bubble is create. So to bring into existence or to produce through imaginative skill. And this is probably why a lot of us are in design, is for like the creativity and the generation. So here's a few images. The top one at Zukin, the middle at Design Central, and the third in Seattle at Pensar. But be a great collaborator and team player. Everything that you do is based on a team effort. Like the quality of your work is elevated by everyone that's around you. And there's no superstar solo designer out there working on his own. And even those people, if they are a unique unicorn, they would be elevated by having a team around them of support. So just acknowledging that like everything you do is supported and better by the people around you. Just be a good team player. Like don't be egotistical and don't be in it for yourself. Like again, a lot of these things might be obvious, but they really do matter throughout your career journey. Exercise being an interdisciplinary designer. So like a lot of times, like in consumer electronics, for instance, you'll be working as the industrial designer on a team of a mechanical engineer, an electrical engineer, and yourself. And so like you're all working together, but to understand like what they're actually trying to do and like what their job is and what their goals are, and like just being able to understand more of what the people around you are doing will help you inform your own decisions to make what you want to actually push through. And it also just elevates the whole team, obviously, but being able to understand like what a mechanical engineer's goals are to like make a product for manufacturing will help you get to a smoother path of least resistance to get your design ideas across. Put in the time to practice and achieve fluidity with your tools. So this is just a note on like, you never want to like be working and have have your abilities hold you back. And I think I might have another slide on this as well, but you really need to work to get your sketching up to par and your CAD skills up to par, your rendering abilities, so that you're never worrying about like trying to learn the software skills. You just want to have them as, just as openly as you can speak. You should be able to do that through sketching and CAD modeling. And so that takes practice, and you can do it on side projects. This is a sign we have up at Teague. We're all 3D designers, so make early and often. Make things is our motto. So like we have 3D printers, and if we're working on a project, we'll be running those 3 printers every day, all night, constantly. And so like anything that you can make physically, like if you're designing a watch, you'll learn more by 3D printing a block, just a literal block that's the right volume, as opposed to sketching all day long. So just making physical objects and being able to experience them is paramount. Iteration and failures are part of the process, so just acknowledge that and understand that like your failures are learning, they're equivalent. So like when you test something out, assume that there's going to be a lot of things that you want to change. So just embrace the iteration and embrace the failures being getting you closer to learning, because every design project is design is never done, it's due. So just being able to understand that you're trying to just get the most done that you can within that timeline to make the best design you can. This kind of harps back to that knowing your tools and being fluid with your tools, but don't let your tools drive your design. So this probably is most applicable for like CAD modeling. So if you have this vision for some really cool design and you've sketched it out, or you thought it out, or you just see it through inspiration and it's kind of a Frankenstein of different things, you have this amazing vision for whatever it is, and then you look at it and you're like, how do I model that? Like, I have no idea how I'm going to CAD model that thing and surface it. It looks really complex or whatever. Don't let that hold you back. You need to solve those problems to get there. Don't just start in CAD and because you only know extrude or whatever, like don't let your CAD modeling drive your design. Like kind of really define a vision for what you want. And then kind of actively seek to problem solve to get to that vision. Don't just like go wild in CAD and see what ends up happening. And I'm definitely someone who did that in the past when I was in school. So communicate. So the third bubble is the communication part. So to convey knowledge or information, transmit information, thought, or feeling. And this is the third bubble, and this is probably the most important slide I have on this entire deck. So it's completely dependent. Your success as a designer is completely dependent on your ability to communicate. And so what I mean by that, your ability to communicate with your client to understand what they want. You tell them what you will do and when you'll do it. You tell them when things change, or they'll tell you when things change. And that communication back and forth, you set expectations for what will be successful, what will be a successful outcome. You tell your boss how quickly you can get that work done. And then after the project's over, you tell your boss how that project went so that it gets better and, hopefully goes better the next time. So basically just like all your success is based on your ability to communicate. No matter your skill set, no matter your quality, no matter your design chops, if you could design the most amazing product or not, like you're just your ability to tell your client like, hey, you're asking for this, I'm going to get this done on this date. I'll provide you with that. And just the communication back and forth can actually create a more successful project than just doing some really hot thing and having terrible communication throughout the project. So tell a powerful and thoughtful story, a solution or idea. So basically this just gets back to, design is storytelling. And design is all about like user experience. So just understand that like when you're trying to sell your ideas, make sure that it's based on user experience and that you understand like how this would actually benefit the user. It's not just all about shapes, or forms. It's all about user experience. So understanding the story and how this fits into a person's life is really important. Rising tide raises all boats, so give back. So like if you have a superpower, like my superpower is sketching, I'm always willing to share that. I'm always running sketching workshops in the companies I work for, or just trying to help people out, or teaching at universities, giving workshops. So like if you have a superpower, something you're really good at, or even if you're not that great at it, but you acknowledge that you're better than your coworker, that you can look over their shoulder, like share your knowledge and information. It'll only make you better. And obviously like sharing and teaching others really helps you learn and understand your own process. So it'll only make yourself better as well. Don't burn bridges, always be your best self. Hopefully none of you have ever seen me like this. Just, represent yourself well. Learn to speak to, articulate, and stand up for your opinion. So a lot of times within design, there's kind of moments where you really need to say like, this is what the user should have, or, this would be the best for the user, and you just have to really fight for it. That's our job, is to be, an advocate for the user. So just being able to like speak to your designs and not just, let a cool sketch sit on a page. You really need to be able to like speak to your reasoning, and your reason for your ideas. Just designing a cool object in CAD is never good enough. The communication part is such an important factor of being a designer. And then keep it real and be down to earth. So we're on this rock flying through space. So just keep it real. You don't have to be, talking about, the way a fillet's curvature is wrapping around a surface. It's not, at the end of the day, we're designing, objects and experiences for humans. We're selling them to other humans. So just keep it real. It'll help you. Be you, don't be Insta famous designer. So there's like these people on the internet that are, have hundreds of thousands of followers, and they're such cookie cutter designers that just kind of pump out maybe the same thing that always gets them the most likes. And just don't form yourself to be like them. Don't like follow their model. Just, define your own path and carve it out. And so these three different spheres really create your mass as a designer. So if those are in balance, you might be a really good consultancy designer. So myself, I think I'm a pretty balanced designer. You might have heard people saying like wearing many hats, new and changing roles with every project, or the ability to contribute throughout the entire project. So if you're able to kind of step in and be able to do design research or generate ideas, or really sell your presentation deck or create that storytelling deck to a client, you're able to be a good consultant because you can be plugged in anywhere and every project is different. So being able to like jump in and have the skills, kind of being well-rounded, will help you out a lot if you're interested in consultancy. You can also be asymmetric, and a lot of times in-house companies are more interested probably in asymmetric designers. So you might see people that are like really amazing at rendering, and maybe they're just like a visual designer where they're just rendering other people's products. If you have a discover superpower, you might be a design researcher, so you have the ability to pull relevant insights. You might be a futurist, like we have a full-time futurist on staff at Teague, and he's exceptional at this kind of discovery. Not that he doesn't understand the other two bubbles, but that his discover superpower is so strong that we try to plug him in on any project where he can like pull out relevant insights. If you have the create superpower, you might end up just being a principal designer someday, an expert in the craft, exceptional execution skills. We have principal designers at Teague, and you just plug them in when you just need that execution phase knocked out, and maybe the client comes to you with a really great idea of what they want. So you can have a create superpower as well in an asymmetric balance. Communicate superpower, maybe you're a design director, project manager, mentor, or educator. So it's totally fine to be asymmetric with those three bubbles. The thing that is not fine is when you have kind of an isolation of one of these bubbles. So for instance, this is like a create isolation where they don't have the discover, the communicate ability. We require all three as designers. You need to discover relevant problems, create relevant solutions, and communicate them to sell your ideas. And so like if you have this kind of create superpower, and you can't, design relevant things or create relevant things, and you can't communicate them for people to understand, you might be a fine artist. That's kind of a crude example, but we do require all three as designers. So these three, and you can focus, with your asymmetry if you'd like, but these three different categories kind of help you pull in opportunities and kind of grow your mass as a designer. So, going through things like portfolio reviews or doing side personal projects or IDSA events, going to conferences. As you continue to do these things, more opportunities are kind of drawn to you. So like for myself, like you might be able to present or talk on a panel or teach, having more opportunities drawn to you as you kind of grow your mass and keep absorbing these different experiences. And maybe your dream job is flying through space and you just don't have the mass to catch it. You just don't have the gravity to pull it in. But as you do more, then you start to realize that like throughout your career, you might be able to have some really amazing opportunities, and you might actually land your dream job by growing your mass and continuing just to kind of chip away at it. And so this just really represents you as a designer. And again, my theory is just to become gravity. So some things to think about. Where do I want to be in 5 to 10 years? What steps do I need to take to get there? And then what can I be doing today to work towards chipping away at that goal? And then you can find me online at Clarridge on most things. Thank you. If I can find my mouse to stop sharing. There we go. You're muted.
Do we show virtual hands clapping, or do we actually clap out loud? But that
Virtual is great.
That was awesome.
Thanks.
Wow. So I love your sort of symmetrical, asymmetrical assessment of just sort of those three characteristics. I think that's something that I feel like I've seen a lot of students, and I think professionals too, sort of struggle with, is, them feeling like they need to be more of one than the other, and not realizing the power of maybe being equal across, or maybe being better at one but still, successful at the other two. So I think that was extremely helpful to see, as well as just even seeing if you are, and I love the notion of the super powered. And I think that's what you shared there is something that I feel like has been really resonating with me personally recently, through a documentary that I watched on Netflix about sort of coaches and famous coaches. And one of the coaches is Doc Rivers, and he talks about Ubuntu, and just this whole notion of we, and the way that we become better is that we are it's basically creating a universe. It's not necessarily one of us that's working together to make all of us better. And just like you were sharing, how do I make my team better, or how do I make myself better? I help by making others better, and by making them better, rising tides raise all ships.
Yep.
I love that analogy that you just shared. Kevin, is there, going back to the beginning of your presentation, it sounded like you were, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said you were first gen graduate?
Yeah. I mean, I have like some relatives out there that are, have gone to college, but yeah, mostly military in my family.
What did that, were there any unique, I guess, challenges or situations that you had to go through during that process of college, and because clearly you have a philosophy, but I'm imagining that philosophy has evolved.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, huge challenges. I mean, the entire financial burden of college is on my shoulders, and still today. I mean, I had no help at all from my family, not because I didn't want to, just because they couldn't. And I have other brothers as well. But yeah, I mean, and then also like working, full time, like I was working like 40 hours plus a week while attending, college full time. I was in the class of 2012, but my financials were kind of so backed up that they made me go for a 5th year to kind of split my senior year part-time. So I did all my design classes my 4th year. And then I kind of had all these general electives that I had to finish up my 5th year. So I was kind of working at Design Central while I was finishing up to actually get my degree my 5th year. So certainly plenty of hurdles to overcome, and just, persevering through, and having your classmates that are working all day long in the studio, and then you come in after work at midnight or whatever, and they're wrapping up and you're just getting started. So yeah.
Outside of what I'm assuming is heavy doses of coffee, how did you, was there either a mindset or a process? Because I think that's one thing that I feel like we're seeing a lot of these days, is we're seeing a lot of students who are taking 18 credit hours, and I'm working a 40-hour job, and they're trying to balance a lot of things. Was there something that you found that helped you be successful, or at least helped you live through that phase?
I mean, I guess it's just perseverance. Like, I'm not sure that I was super thrilled with my projects when I got them completed, just knowing how much time some of, you would have, students that you were going to school with that had full rides, and, it's great for them, and nothing bad or negative on them, but like just seeing the amount of work that they were able to put into things. And then I think the real benefit of like that it actually helped me with is I work exceptionally fast. Like I'm extremely fast at everything, and I think a lot of that probably came from college, coming in at midnight and having to like bust out something really fast. And so like obviously I would think about it while I was working and be able to like come in with like a vision for what I wanted to do. But just the actual like being forced to actually work really quickly like works perfectly for the consultancy world, where you need to generate tons of ideas and tons of sketches and do CAD models and do a lot of work really quickly, get a prototype finished very rapidly. You don't have like the luxury of like sitting around and being like, oh, I'll get to it tomorrow. So I think in that respect it actually helped me become really fast.
Sure. Yeah, I love your quote, and I think your quote is, until you get out into the real world, I think you don't understand how to live that, which was design is never done but do.
Yeah, someone else said that. It's a great quote. I love it.
Yeah, I think this is where, and I feel like we see this with students, and I'm sure maybe clearly it sounds like maybe you felt this way, and maybe occasionally still do, where you might not be happy with where things are, but they are where they are. How did you deal with that as a student? Because I think we hear that same thing with students, where I think there's a level of frustration to, I could have done more, I could have done more, I could have done more. Is there a special way to handle that, or how do you approach that from a mental perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a philosophy too about like, just like sharing things and being done with them so that I know that like the next time I work on it, it'll be better. And like, I'm never satisfied with anything that I do. Even as soon as it's done, I know I could do it better. And it's all based on, like design is never done. Like you can continue to refine it and continue to iterate and learn. But yeah, I think like just acknowledging that like it's not your best project, but you'll have another chance to do another one, and keep moving forward. Like a lot of times, like early on when I was posting on Instagram or social media, like a lot of my fellow students were like didn't want to share their work because it wasn't great, and like I just kind of embraced like I know it's not great, but if I post it, I can move on. And you'd have classmates that would just like sketch or CAD model and keep trying to refine, and they never end up sharing it because it's never done. And you just have to acknowledge like, yeah, I just need to like, this is where it's at today. I'm going to move on. And by the time that I'm, thinking back to that project, hopefully I have another project that's done and it'll be a step ahead of where it's at, and just kind of keep focusing on moving forward. Yeah.
Your statement of and granted, I don't feel like it happens a whole lot at CCAD. I think students are pretty open with their stuff, but I do feel like in this virtual scenario that we're in right now, I definitely find students that do exactly what you're describing. And as I look at the board, I'm seeing several of their faces. I won't mention their names, but where they are apprehensive of sharing, and they are apprehensive of, hey, this could be better, and I'm not sure what I think about sharing it. But there's definitely a lot of apprehension there. Is there something that helped you overcome that, or were you just sort of naturally, hey, here's my stuff?
No, definitely not. I mean, yeah, of course it's awkward and weird. And, especially in my scenario where like I knew like my work wasn't my best work because I just didn't put the right amount of time or didn't have the time to put into it. Yeah, it can be awkward. And even when you think it is your best work, it's still, like awkward to share, and, you're going to have criticism. But I think that kind of speaks to that slide I had where you really need to like separate yourself from your work and like just start to treat that as a behavior of like, as soon as I sketch a thing, as soon as I CAD model a thing, as soon as I build a thing, like it's not a part of me anymore. It's like out there in the world, and I can experience it and I can try it out and I can be, ruthless about it. Like this really sucks, and like it's okay to like, say that like something you did really sucks because you're like learning and you know how to improve it. And the more you do that, the more you'll be able to like do it better next time. So like if you just keep it all internal and you just don't share your work, you don't have that ruthless introspection on what you're doing, and you kind of keep it as like your baby, you're just never going to get better at iterating good ideas quickly. But yeah, I think it's okay. And it like helps me out a lot to think like whenever I'm done with something, it's like detached from myself. So like, like that controller project is an instance where like the first 3D print I did, I was like, man, this sucks. And it's kind of almost relieving just to be like, this is now a physical object that lives in the world and other people can experience it and I can experience it independently. It's no longer my baby. Like as soon as it comes out of my head, like it's detached and I can criticize it. And it's, yeah, I mean, you have to treat it that way when you're in the real world, like when you're doing projects for clients. you can't think that like, you know, the first thing you build or your first idea is like, oh, this is really cool. Like you need to be really critical of it because your client will come in and they'll tear it apart if you haven't done that.
But to that point of criticism, because that, you know, one of the things that I've been trying to do in, you know, one of my classes, but I would argue I try to do it as a whole, is this notion of, you know, think about yourself as a design director, and that you're working with your classmates and you're providing criticism as if you're the studio lead. How do you, what, I guess, what criticisms that you've actually experienced were helpful in your design? Because I know criticism can kind of cut a couple different ways. Sometimes it can just be mean spirited, and I've been around people like that. And then I think other times it can be very constructive. So if you were to help somebody provide constructive feedback, what would you encourage them to do if they're reviewing somebody's work?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to your personal perspective, because I feel like even if someone gives you, you know, really constructive criticism that shouldn't, you know, affect you and shouldn't be personal, like you can always, you know, take a lens and through your own perspective, make it personal and make it negative. And so, yeah, I think just being like, I mean, it's the ownership's on you to like be open and like share that like, hey, I'm willing to have my designs critiqued. I'm willing to have my work criticized because I want to get better. I think, yeah, I mean, like most of the places I've worked, I think almost all of them, like you embody the culture of like being very raw with your criticism, because you just have to understand that you're not doing the work for yourself, you know, like it's not a personal project. You're not, you know, you're working for a client who's paying you a lot of money. So like, you just have to, you know, be critical. And so it just helps out a lot to not have to like skate around and be like, you know, like, let me give you a compliment sandwich. So let me tell you two good things. It's like, let me put that thing on. And if it's not working, it's not working. Like, and just being, I think like really just embodying like open to criticism, like, hey, what do you think about this? You know, and I think you just really have to own it for yourself, because if you don't, if you're taking negatively to everyone giving you criticism, then, you know, no one's going to give you criticism and be like, oh, you know, that's the guy that doesn't want to hear anything about his work or whatever. So yeah, take the ownership on yourself to be okay with getting your work critiqued, because it will make you better.
Cool. I'm curious, one of the things, thinking about your process, because obviously you showed a range of sort of obviously sketches, you showed some physical things, whether those were 3D printed, et cetera. What within your process, when do you get physical within your design process, and why do you get physical?
Yeah, as early and as often as you can. So I mentioned like we have like three 3D printers that we kind of have in our small studio. But we also have like, you know, the 5-axis CNC where they're able to make like giant, you know, like we did a line of ATVs recently, like a set of 3 of them, and we were able to make them full scale. But yeah, I think I mentioned that like, you know, like if you're working on, you know, an object like a camera, for instance, you could sketch on it for, you know, months, you could CAD model, you could render, but you would learn more in one day of just printing off a dumb block that represents the volume and being able to experience it physically more than you'd be able to spend, you know, months on that, just thinking about it in 2D space. It's so important. I don't share a lot of like physical making on my personal Instagram, but yeah, it's like it's something you have to do. Like you need to make physical objects. You'll see a lot of places that, you know, just like hack things together, or like if you're designing something and you're like, oh, it's kind of like this, and you just like, you know, grab 2 objects and put them together and, you know, just try to experience it as quickly as you can. You know, you can print off things and cut them out, you know, like have 2-dimensional cross sections of physical objects. You can do all sorts of things to try to make physical prototypes. But yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, we're designing 3D objects. So the value of doing physical 3D things is, you know, the most important out of any other process of sketching and CAD modeling. Your CAD modeling is the drive to get you to something to 3D print or have fabricated so you can experience it.
So this maybe this is the trick question, and I'm not sure if I backed you in a corner here, but were you this way as a student?
I would say probably not. Yeah, for sure. Like I spent a lot of time like sketching and CAD modeling and rendering. You know, we didn't really, I think we had one 3D printer. We had just gotten it, and, you know, like not a lot of people knew how to use it, and it was like always not running. You know, and obviously I could have like, you know, just carved out foam and stuff like that. And I could have took it upon myself to be more physical. But yeah, certainly, like looking back, that would definitely be one thing I would change, is just to be more scrappy. And, even if it's just printing off, paper and trying to like fold it up to experience things, or, just making the crudest of prototypes would have really advanced my capabilities early on.
Kevin, do you feel like there was and not that you haven't expressed all the wonderful reasons to get physical fast, but I'm curious, was there a moment in which you were like, you had an epiphany, or like, duh, why am I not doing this? And you kind of started doing that more frequently than maybe you had in the past?
I think a lot of those epiphanies happened like when I started like interning at Design Central. Like when I interned at Travelon in Chicago doing soft goods, you could actually make and prototype everything just by like sewing, like super fast. But I think like for some reason in my mind, it was like, oh, that's what people do in soft goods. They make early and often. You can get prototypes made and have them sewn up overseas and see them the next morning and have like a final product, image emailed to you. And I didn't realize like with hard goods or like, everything outside of soft goods that you should be doing the exact same thing. It's just your capabilities of making that final product. Like I could sew up a wallet and it looks like a real product you could buy on the shelf. But you need to be doing the same thing with physical product design, but you might be doing it through foam or, cutting wood and just trying out, just being more scrappy with it. Yeah, so I think when I ended up working at Design Central, I realized how much of the time we're making physical objects and prototypes. It's essential, and how many times we would just CNC a bunch of dumb objects just to experience them, as opposed to spending a long time like sketching them out and thinking through them.
Yeah. You had mentioned well, obviously we've been talking about sort of physical things, but throughout the course of your presentation, you described user experience as a broader term.
Mm-hmm.
As you start to think about the entire user experience, I guess, what are some of the ways in which you try to either get yourself into that mindset, or who do you interact with to kind of move outside of the product itself?
Yeah, so Teague is interesting in that we're kind of, at least our team of like 30 in the global design studio, we're really like considered all user experience designers. We're kind of like moving away from having specific roles. So we have like a lot of people that might have titles that are like digital designers, or and there's a lot of them that have industrial design backgrounds. But I think like in general, like when we get on a project, we all tackle user experience. And because design is like, at least everything that we do at Teague and in most places I've worked are also user centric. At the end of the day, you're just trying to develop the best user experience. And so like at a place like Teague, where we're able to do high class physical objects, but we're also able to do really high class digital design, we're able to like just solve the problem through whatever it needs. And so we don't go into a project thinking like this has to be a physical object with a dial, or this has to be an application. We kind of just like address the problem and say like, what does this need to be? And so like I can provide ideas and be more of a digital designer on some projects, and those people will also give ideas on like the physical product, because we're all just working towards the best user experience.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think a lot of design is kind of going in that direction of just really focusing on the user. And at the end of the day, you're providing a solution to hopefully like enhance the user's experience. So to say like I'm a user experience designer, I might have more of a craft or an industrial design traditional background, so I might be better at forming or generating physical objects for that user experience. But yeah, we all kind of like flow and blend and provide ideas, and we don't have stay out lanes. Like they don't tell me to shut up if I offer an interface idea or something, and I obviously welcome them to do the same for physical products. So yeah.
Do you feel so clearly at Teague, and it sounds like maybe at some of the other places that's been a similar experience of sort of the sharing? Is there anything, sort of, again, sort of putting yourself back as a student, do you feel like were the students that you were with, did they behave that way, or what could maybe encourage that behavior if you weren't seeing it? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think like what I'm kind of speaking to is like the interdisciplinary roles that you might play in a studio. I think as a student, because you're trying to get up to speed on just the industrial design part of things, that you really focus in on kind of the craft of industrial design, like the crafting of a physical object. the aesthetics, kind of the 10 principles of Dieter Rams, if you kind of are thinking through those, and maybe you're focused so much on, the physical object itself that you're not really fully locking into like, how does this benefit the user? And obviously like we did a lot of journey mapping and like identifying like insights and areas and problems. But I think at the end of the day, you're so focused because it's such a new thing to do that you're kind of too focused on the physical object and not so much on its translation to how it improves people's lives. Like at the end of the day, if you have some really cool object, you might be really proud of as a student, but at the end of the day, when someone's like reviewing your portfolio to give you a job, they want to know like, why does this matter? Why would a user, who wants to buy this? Like those sorts of questions that are like, huge gaping holes in a project that just looks cool as a physical object.
I was going to say that sure, I could easily see. I mean, I clearly understand the benefits of that, and obviously, and that's something within my career personally. I know that we've been very focused on the user experience. Is there? But I could also imagine the challenges, because at some point, I could see if the client came to you and said, "Hey, we want you to, make some new earbud equivalent. We want our version of that." And yet maybe you see the problem as maybe bigger or the opportunity bigger. How do you approach that with a client? How do you bridge that situation? Or if you've got any examples of that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think like not all product design and especially a lot of product design you do in the real world is going to be like hyper innovative, where you're able to like totally flip the industry on its head. So like trying to redesign the AirPods is like a once in a lifetime experience where they're like, hey, like what should the user experience be for headphones? And you come up with some totally unique solution. But yeah, I think like you're alluding to, like clients will give you so many constraints of like, this is our BOM cost. This product needs to have only this amount invested in it. We already have this visual brand language. We have all these constraints that like put you down the specific route of like what you have to do. But user experience can still guide you on, all the small details. So even if you're like, if they fenced you in into a very small hole of like, it needs to look and function very similar to the AirPods. While you're still working in there, every surface or every decision you make, how you charge it, how they're stored, what's the CMF or the brand language, like all of those things should, hark back to that user experience. So even if you're not changing the world and, completely inverting it on its head, like every decision that you make should be based on user experience, no matter how constrained it is.
Do you find, because I feel like one of the things that, and I think this is a challenge within the industry, but I definitely see it with students where, it's kind of like they start with maybe an idea and then they're, ooh, and it could do this, and it could do this, and it could do this, and it could do this. And pretty soon they've got this thing that's trying to solve 50 things, and it really doesn't solve anything really well.
Yeah.
Do you have how do you sort of narrow into what's most important and focus on that, and maybe pull some of the noise to the side?
Yeah, that's extremely important. And I did a lot of that, early on, especially with like tech projects. Like, if I was designing a TV, I wanted it to use electromagnetic levitation, and I wanted it to have dual screen, like where you and your partner could be watching, different things on the screen, and throw in everything, like you definitely, like I've been there, and as a designer, it's easy to do that. I was interviewing at Artifact, and they've recently, dissolved their entire ID department. But like I was interviewing there, and their creative director was like, he told me exactly that. He's like, you're trying to do too many things within a project, and if you just did one thing really well, you'd have such a more powerful, design. And I think that's extremely important with like, in the real world, you're trying to like really solve what you can do well. So like having a realistic mindset of like, this is what we're going to be able to accomplish. And so let's just really focus on doing that really well. But yeah, as a student, it's hard not to be like, why can't it do all these things? But at the end of the day, you're not going to do any of them, exceptionally well. You're just going to have a bunch of, good experiences, but no great experience. But yeah, I would definitely recommend just focusing on one thing and do it well. And yeah, that was advice given to me when I interviewed.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm curious too, because I think one of the things, and again, I feel like I see this from a student perspective, but I think this happens in the industry as well, is just this notion of, the within the solution somewhere, especially with students, again, they're like, I've made it cheaper. I've made it cheaper. I've made it cheaper. Is there a situation or product that you've worked on that that actually wound up being much more expensive, and that actually was a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of projects. I would say maybe if I had to give a percentage or a fraction, I would say maybe half your projects seem to be like, trying to make products more efficient or trying to create a next generation. Where the goal or intent is to, give a better technology or a better technical package and provide like a cheaper solution. The other half of the projects are something new and interesting and different where you're, creating some high valued product or, really branching out or expanding a product line. And yeah, creating something that's more expensive or creating more value because they're trying to like really put their stake in the ground in the market. But yeah, I would say maybe if I had to roughly guess, not that it's accurate, but maybe like half and half, like half the projects are, just iterations or revisions or updating a project or a product line that's, existing and, making those more efficient, cheaper to produce. But I think there's also something really interesting with like all of those projects. Typically, they want to have a better user experience and they want to use better technology as well. So you're always trying to make, like if you're redesigning the Apple Watch, you're trying to make it thinner. You're trying to use better technology. It needs to have a better screen, better refresh rate, but it does have to be cheaper. So like all of those projects that require you to be cheaper, the fun part of it is problem solving, how to actually make it better for the user where they think it's an update and upgrade while doing that.
Is that natural sunlight that I see in your background in Seattle? I thought it was only cloudy and rainy.
Yeah, I'm trying to like move to avoid it.
The handful of times that I've been in Seattle, which I've always enjoyed being there, I've been blessed by having sunny weather, and everybody's like, "Man, last week it was totally rainy, and here it's beautiful when you're here." So
yeah, the summers are perfect, but yeah, it gets dark and moody all winter.
Yeah,
but no snow.
Hopefully you get to enjoy some sun here today, if not this weekend.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about you were talking about sort of these new products, and sometimes you're adding new technologies, et cetera. Thinking about your process, how has your process evolved? Not necessarily of maybe yours, like, hey, I'm a sketcher, then I did physical, but maybe more of the process of developing within the agency world, and how do you perceive VR impacting that?
Yeah, I'll touch on the VR first. So the VR is an amazing tool for being able to visualize things that you can't 3D print. So like anything that's larger than a 3D print bed, we usually will throw in VR. I just wrapped up a project doing like an autonomous flying plane, drone, passenger vehicle of the future. And we were using VR all the time, like almost every day, just checking out like our designs in CAD. Because there's so many things that you can validate of like, sight lines and ergonomics and usability and like entering and exiting the vehicle, like where do the displays sit? But then you need to make those things physical. So like we have the whole team up north that's able to, build mock-ups and bucks and use 5x CNCs to model out that foam. So VR is great if you can't like 3D print a small object. Like if we're working on like a wearable or something, we would definitely just 3D print it and experience it, physically. But for things that are like larger than a 3D print bed, especially ones that have like human factors or ergonomics, like, power tools come to mind, or like if you're doing a lawnmower or something, things that you can't just readily 3D print at full scale. VR is really great for that, but you still need to, check them out physically. I think my process, how it might have changed, I think I'm just becoming more aware of how flexible that you have to be. So like, like typically like Design Central actually had a really great job of like, with working with Procter and Gamble, a lot of their projects are like very fundamentally, the process of industrial design was very linear, a lot like what you would do in school. So you would go through design research, you would, ideate on ideas, you would start, mocking up prototypes, and you kind of go through that whole phase, and it's very linear and structured. And I think that's just because they have such a great relationship with Procter and Gamble that they're able to actually go through that traditional process. I think when you go to other places, a lot of other consultancies I've been to, they seem to be a lot more flexible with like where you enter the project and where you exit the project, just based on your superpowers as like a company. So like a lot of work that we get at Teague is, we're really good at like defining a perspective on the future, or defining, systems or products of the future. So a lot of times we'll come in very early on and people have no idea like what they should do, like what is a vehicle of the future, or like, how is like the Virgin Hyperloop going to work? Like, what does that mean for a passenger to sit in a tube and, fly through in this dark space? So like projects like that where people don't really understand like the really upfront early work. At Pensar where I worked, they were very heavily like mechanically engineering focused. So a lot of projects that came to us were very much on the back end. Like they really had a defined vision of what they needed, and they just really needed someone to execute on like, how do we make this, efficient thermally, electrically, how do we, integrate this with software? But yeah, just for myself, like being able to work at different places, you have to be flexible to be like, yeah, I'm going to put on my futurist hat today. And then other projects that'll come in, it's very much like executionary. So I think just the flexibility of knowing that like every project is totally different. You're not going to be able to like, use the same process. And then a lot of times it's not linear. Like a lot of times you'll try something out, you'll test it out with users, and then you have to kind of backtrack and be like, hey, our hypothesis was wrong. We need to reevaluate and retry this. So kind of those three circles of like discover, create, and communicate, those oftentimes happen multiple times. So you're kind of iterating on that cycle of like, we're going to try something out, we're going to learn from it, communicate it back, and try again. So I think, yeah, just the flexibility I think has changed.
Very cool. One of the things, and I'll open, let me just ask maybe one or two more questions and I'll open it up to the floor because I'm sure there's lots of questions here. You had mentioned and you had shared before we sort of opened the room up, you were sharing your keyboard and guitar, but you also had sort of talked about some of the visuals, not only on your wall, but you kind of shared those as kind of a theme of, and I love this because I think it's something that we all need to do a better job of, is like, what does great design look like? And just having that collection of visuals on your wall, digitally somewhere in your space, but you're always sort of measuring what is good design. I'm curious, how do you, is there a certain amount of time that you spend like during the week? It's like, all right, this is like my good design finding process, and I set along some time, or do you kind of gather these as you go, and what is it that you're looking for?
Yeah, definitely don't have like a structure to it, because I mean, I have so many things I have to do during the workday. I don't have like a time where I could just dedicate to it. If I were ever like creative director, I would definitely enforce like, an hour on Friday of like, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Everyone's just gonna stop working and start looking at design or something. If I were to set up an educational system, one class would be on, focusing on market analysis and, design inspiration and just that whole study of it. How I go about it is like when I open my web browser, I have, a predefined set of like a dozen or more tabs that just automatically come up, and they're all just design inspiration. So I look at things like Uncreate and Les Manouche, and there's just tons of blogs out there, Behance, you can just scroll through it forever. Obviously like social media is a great, you follow all of these people that are doing amazing things. But yeah, so anytime I just open up my web browser, it automatically shows up and I can just start clicking through them and closing them and seeing what's new. But yeah, I think it's so important just to understand what good design is. And I think good design a lot of times can just, you feel it naturally, you understand it, like even just by looking at it, like the amount of thought and attention to detail and the iteration that they've done to, achieve whatever product you're looking at. A lot of times it just comes naturally and you understand it, like, oh, that's good design. I think there is a watch out of like what I see a lot of is like, if you're familiar with Les Manouche, like all the products that are on there is just designed for designers. So I think there's this whole category of like super hyper simplified minimal product design that's just, you don't design like that every day. You're not always designing for designers. I think like society as a whole is valuing design more. So I think, a lot of Les Manouche, understanding that is good design for a certain market, but sometimes you're designing for mothers, or children, or there's a whole variety of design outside of like this hyper minimal, clean Apple aesthetic.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll ask you to do it now, because I'm sure one of the students will ask you to do it later, will be if there's any links that you can share with all of us that
Yeah.
you don't have to do that now, obviously, but as a follow-up to this, I'm sure everybody would love to see some of the stuff that you're looking at. Is there, just trying to think of a follow-up here. One of the things, obviously, you're sort of surrounded by design on the back wall, but you're surrounded by some things that clearly are not maybe directly design. What do you do when you want to go, okay, I want to put this day behind me and I don't want to think about design. I just want to be, or I just want to do something that's fun. What are some of the things that you do?
Yeah. So I love like dabbling in a lot of like different creative avenues. So like I can just like start grabbing shit that's all around me. So like I almost always have like, an iPad for sketching. I'm into photography. There was a bird hanging out outside my window the other day. So I'm into photography and videography and drone piloting. I'm also into like music making. So I've got like a beat machine sampler. I've got my synthesizer. Yeah, I mean, I love design. Like I love creativity. So like I try to have enough things like around me, and like obviously I love tech too. So that's like a major factor in like trying to like learn a new thing and like learning photography. But yeah, I just like I enjoy having enough creative avenues where I'm like always hyper passionate. Like I really want to get back to like making music. I really want to get back to like like right now I'm like, oh, I haven't posted a digital sketch. I haven't done like a really nice digital sketch in a while. And then like once I go down those avenues, and I'll be like, oh man, I really need to like prototype something and get something 3D printed. Like so I want to have enough going on where I always have something that I'm like super passionate about. Um, Obviously I'm human, so like sometimes I'll just be like, I just need a week off. Like I'm just gonna do whatever, play video games or whatever. But yeah, I think like just having a lot of things that you're interested in where you can always just be really passionate about them, and if they align with design, that's great. Like photography obviously helps you a ton with like understanding how to render, so like that's mutually beneficial. But yeah.
Cool. I will open the mic up to questions. So not sure the best way to do this other than we'll see if it's just controlled chaos, or if we do this at an agreeable pace, or if you guys want to raise your hands and then I can acknowledge and then you can ask questions. We can maybe do it that way, if that works best. Anybody have a question they'd like to ask Kevin? Mr. Tooney?
Oh,
Yeah, so we on mute. Hey, Kev, how you doing?
Hey, good to see you.
So, are you seeing, when you first got into the design field and now, are you seeing kind of a shift in the way projects are being done, meaning either the level or scope of the projects or the complexity of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think like social media, I think, and just the internet has elevated, the quality of design and like the process of design so tremendously. Like looking back at my portfolio and like understanding that like, Core Flat was just like on the verge of coming out, and like we were seeing projects online, but it was like, like you would see projects that looked like yours. It was just like other students. And like now you see on the internet, you see the most amazing, designers from all over the world showing their best work, and you're just flooded with it. And so like the caliber of like understanding what a good sketch, a good, a 3D model, a good rendering, what a good prototype looks like is just so elevated beyond where I was, So yeah, I think the just the ability to like observe and be aware of what's out there has helped tremendously.
I'm going to ask, and this is somewhat of a self-serving question on my part, and maybe for Toonies. Obviously, you're a CCAD grad, and you've probably seen CCAD. I know you worked with Oscar, and you probably worked with some other CCAD grads. Is there something that you think is unique to CCAD, or something that you think CCAD could or maybe should own as a differentiator? Obviously, to me, UC, why do you go to UC? You go there for the internships. But I guess my question to you would be, why should you go to CCAD?
Yeah. I mean, as much as I've thought back to like, man, I didn't get all those internship experiences that like UC had. I do see that like a lot of my fellow classmates are like some of the best designers that I've ever seen, like out in the field. My best friend in college, Dustin Horn, he ended up working at Artifact, and he's like the last industrial designer that's at Artifact. He's still doing contract work with them even after they dissolved Artifact, and they were like such a dream to me of like, man, I wish I could work there. And like there's so many talented designers that have gone through CCAD, and I think I don't know if it's maybe that like maybe we get a little chip on our shoulder that like people don't know like CCAD or you go to these big companies and, you're not one of those big names and you're working with a bunch of people that kind of got in because of where they went to school. Maybe that's got some drive for us. I think another factor is, how much emphasis we put on that foundational year. I assume it's still the same of like, you go through graphic design, 2D design, typography, and like just understanding how much of like all the different arts actually contribute to like you as a whole. I think a lot of other schools, like, you go to a school like Art Center and you're like, you have this prestige because people know the name. But really all you are is, better at sketching cars. And it's like, that's not applicable to your job at all. Like that will never benefit you, but like understanding good graphic design when you're, with other students in your class that are like, exceptional graphic designers, like having those skills actually do apply, and it really elevates you like as a whole. And then, whatever experiences they had through, these, all-star professors or people that come in that are industry, working with Audi or whatever, like, I think your design skills catch up and can surpass them for sure. So, but yeah, I think, I definitely know like some of the best designers that I've ever worked with were from CCAD, but I don't know that I know that magic sauce that made that happen, but there's something there.
Yeah, cool. Other questions for Kevin?
Hey, Kevin.
Oh, go ahead.
Hey,
I know I haven't seen you or talked to you in a while, but I got to see you. You probably remember, got to see you out in Seattle last December. It was
I
awesome. Anyways, I just wondered, because I know at that event I was at, where you guys Teague unveiled Garage, your VR like platform. Is that what you've been using a lot? I know when you mentioned you've been doing stuff like VR every day in terms of CAD to mock up. Have you been using Garage a lot?
We've actually been using Gravity Sketch. So we just our client actually like purchased VR headsets and just downloaded Gravity Sketch, and we've just been sharing native files with them.
Okay.
Garage is more of a tool that's for really complex and like a lot more CAD data.
Okay.
So like what we were working on, at least in the conceptual phase, was like very low surface count, and like so the data was able to just like we could just send them a zip file and they just throw it on their VR headset and it works. Garage is really like when you're trying to do like really complex assemblies. So like we developed that for those ATV systems where, they're providing different chassis data. We're importing all these different parts into an assembly, and, we're updating the design. And so all of those come in, and it's just a massive amount of data. And then we have to like export that out in a way that's able to be viewed. Gravity Sketch is like super limiting. It's like, 30,000 faces or so. So yeah, I think there's a threshold where you actually can't use Gravity Sketch beyond like a certain fidelity. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that was my question.
Depends on the project, but yeah, sometimes we'll use our own tool, and if there's a more widely available tool, then we'll use that. Works.
How has Teague been in general? Just with, as soon as I know a lot of places got laid off. Obviously, I'm glad you're still there. Did you see a lot of people let go, or was that more? Because I know you guys are a small department anyways, and I know the aviation department's huge. But like in your just kind of your spot downtown, did you lose many people at all, or were you able to hold on to a lot of people?
Yeah, we haven't lost anyone yet, knock on wood. I think the aviation studio, I think certain things that are, happen with Boeing really affect us strongly. So like, I think like the Boeing had a specific model that was having trouble, and I think that affected, and they had some layoffs based on that specific development, just because like when we're doing work with Boeing, like, there's, millions and billions of dollars being spent. If there's like any fluctuation in that ongoing work, then it really affects the aviation side. On our global design studio, we've been doing a really great job of staying busy, and we haven't had to let anyone go. Yeah, I don't know. We haven't gotten our bonuses, but it's like we've just taken measures to make sure that we don't have to let anyone go. And we've had some times where like we had to take like everyone took like one unpaid week off. So like we just kind of share the burden across everyone, and so yeah.
Cool.
We haven't gotten our bonuses at CCAD as well. So
Yeah, I miss bonuses.
any other questions?
Yeah, I was going to ask. Hello, Kevin. I'm
Hello.
Trent. I'm a sophomore here. When I initially was an engineer for a while, and I think what drew me to industrial design was the creativity aspect and the fact that I still get to work with my hands. how did you combine, like, how did you find that pathway to take things that you do in like your spare time and the hobbies that you enjoy? Have you found a way to blend that into your professional life a little bit and like work on more stuff that you enjoy more that way? And what was the process of finding that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that whole theme of like becoming gravity was like my whole journey of like, I was working on Swiffer and Febreze and doing, household goods that just didn't really resonate with what I love. And I want to do spaceships and, consumer electronics and cameras with gimbals built in and, weird tech shit like that. So like I was just doing that always on the side because it's what I loved. And I think doing that on the side and doing what I loved on my free time, like it caused me to be able to share that for like my interviewing and got me a job at like Teague. So like now I don't have to like spend as much time doing personal projects because I'm, working. Like I just finished a project with a famous automotive designer who designed like 2 out of my favorite top 5 cars of all time. He's a legend. I wish I could share everything with you guys. But I was able to work on a flying autonomous passenger drone vehicle of the future. And I think that all comes down to like me pouring so much of my love and passion into it that it like, I was able to work at a place like Teague to get that opportunity. So yeah, just like do what you love on the side, like just keep true to yourself and like what you love to do. And hopefully someday you'll able to, have a job where you're able to do that and get paid for it. Like getting paid to work on cool technology and, work on VR headsets is a dream for me, but it only happened because like I was doing it on the side. Like I don't think showing my portfolio from the work I did for Fisher Price or Febreze or Swiffer would, be able to get me there. So yeah, that's my whole theory on becoming gravity is just, like force it to be drawn to you by just, having an overwhelming love for what you do.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah. Hi. My name's Aaron Jeske. Did you have any advice for people that are getting ready to enter the design workforce?
Yes. Just be a sponge. Be like willing to like learn and yeah, I mean, I think like there's certain scenarios like when you get out of school, you realize like, wow, everything that I learned in school is exactly applied. Like, like the process of what we were doing from class to class, you thought you were just like going through the motions, but like that's exactly what you'll do in the real world, like for a client. There's a lot of other times, the other half of the time you're working on really strange or interesting problem solving solutions and that are so constrained that it's just like it feels very alien from what you were doing in school where you got to make all the decisions and at the end of the day you were your only critic. And I think yeah, just being flexible and open to like being able to change like the way you work or being willing to adapt like the way you sketch to match other people or just being flexible and yeah, just absorbing everything, like especially early on, the more you can just learn and absorb and not try to like, put your fingerprint on the world as soon as you get out of school, but being more of that sponge and just trying to learn from everyone. And even people that are outside of your industrial design, team, like people that are in marketing and people just like try to absorb everything from everyone. It'll help you out a lot.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just so you juniors know, Kevin's going to be here. Let's see, the December 3rd. He's going to be. I'm sorry, December 8th. He's going to be one of the reviewers of portfolios. So, just so you know, Kevin, we've got a pretty nice pool of people that are going to be there. So, I think seeing the stuff that you have already shared with us, you've elevated the bar in my mind as far as what the expectation is. I'm hoping that the juniors will take to the pressure and deliver because you've really elevated the bar on expectations for sure.
Yeah, I think maybe expanding on that last question as well is like, like your career journey, like it's already started. So like the quality of student you are, like your impression that you're putting on other people, your other coworkers, that'll last forever. So if you're not showing up to class, you don't do your work and you don't care, and all of those things like forever will be with you, and people will always remember you for that. So like your first job, if you show up late, and you don't care about the work, you're not getting things done, like all of those things will last with you forever. So like the slide that I had that was some comic relief, but like always be your best self. That's already started. You're already doing that as a student. Like your coworker or your classmates will end up hiring you in the future. They'll give you the referral that gets you in the door somewhere, or they'll be the voice that's like, don't hire that person. Like those things will stick with you forever. So just like as you enter your career, but also just be aware of it now. Like your legacy has already begun, and everyone understands who you are and how you think and how passionate you are and what you care about. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, I think to follow on that, I think this is, each of us is growing as a designer and as a human, and we all have our faults. So I think to Kevin's point, I think to build off of that, I know there's a lot of things even professionally that I do that I'm still trying to break. They're sort of habits that are sometimes take a while to break. But I think definitely as a student, if there's areas where you feel like, hey, I don't want to be known as the person that was not that great of a presenter. Well, this is your perfect canvas to try and do something new and different, right? Push yourself. Don't just live with who you are. Improve yourself and make yourself better. I think that's one thing I really appreciate, Kevin, that I think exuded from your presentation is just on the whole, become gravity. It's a process, and we know that it's not going to happen overnight. It's something that you work towards. I know in the conversations that I had with Oscar, and he had shared stories of both you and he working and doing those things outside of work. It's like, hey, Swiffer's great project, great client. I don't want to do those things. I want to do electronics. I want to do this. So what do you have to do? You have to do that you have to do that in your spare time, and you have to become who you want to be. And I think that's an important thing for all of us to remember. Even my 52-year-old self, I'm still not who I want to be. I'm working towards who I want to be.
Yeah.
I'd like to
Totally
think I'd be there by now, but sometimes it takes a little extra time. But I know we're all working towards it.
Yeah, I think another side that maybe I don't emphasize enough is like how much of your career is like that human-centered part, which you're starting to touch on, is like, half of it is your skill set and like what you're actually like delivering to your clients, but the other half of it is you as a human being and like how are you to work with. And a major factor of like what jobs you land is like who you know and who you've connected with and who's aware that you're interested in that job. So, all those opportunities that you can take to go to IDSA events and not skip out on those and show up to things like this where I might recognize your name, or, like if you're in town, like reach out so you can come see the studio. Like those sorts of things are so valuable to like just get your name in someone's ear. So like, 5 years down the road, when you want to apply somewhere, they recognize your name, they know you're interested, they know you're inspired to work at a place like that. So, really value those opportunities to connect with people. Because like all of your classmates will end up, all over the world, working at really cool places, and you want to be connected to them, and you want to be connected to everyone that you've ever had the opportunity to mingle with that's in your bubble.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody else? Any other questions? I know we're kind of at the bottom of the hour here. I think I had slated things to be roughly an hour and a half, but any sort of closing questions? Looking for hands on my board here. Well, if there's no other questions, Kevin, I want to thank you. I've been texting Tooney on the side on my phone, and we're like, oh man, we got to post this on YouTube and we got to share this with other people. This was awesome. So I hope I'll confirm this with you later. Hopefully we'll be able to share this, obviously internally with other students online, but at school. But I know one of the things that we're ultimately trying to do is we're in the process of setting up a YouTube channel for the department, and we want to share videos like yours and others because we think they're so important. We know that I know for myself, I didn't know about design. I've kind of stumbled upon it, and I think that journey is very common for a lot of different people. And I think anything that we can do that shortens that journey, ideally shortens it, and they come to CCAD, that'd be great. But ideally shortens that journey. I think is good for the world, right? So
Yep.
to me, I think we're doing our duty. But I think that's something that we're super excited to roll out, and hopefully other students will watch your presentation and take away from it as much as I feel like I have tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Anytime.
Well, I'll give you a wave and let me get all my things going here. I feel like I need to be able to do my hand and wave and act and all that. So I'll throw up some, I don't know if that's confetti or fireworks or whatever, but thank
Us
you.
old guys just aren't good at this emoji stuff.
Well, it's all a matter of like where it is on the interface. It's like, wait a minute, it used to be there, now it's here. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you in the early part of December.
Yeah, look forward to it. If you guys want to reach out to me at Clarridge on Instagram is probably the best way.
Cool.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
Seeing you, Kevin. Hopefully I'll see you in December when you come here.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Good to see you.
awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Bye.
Bye-bye.